So this item sat for months without being sold and without a single serious offer. So after looking at the listing for a little bit, we changed a few things and then it eventually sold. So if you're curious how we got this item to sell after it's sitting for so long, make sure you stay tuned to later on in the video because I'm going to share exactly what we changed to get this item sold quicker. So in this week's video, we're going to be talking about how we deal with slow moving stock and the different things that you can change to try and shift those pieces that are just taking too long to sell. So if you're new here, my name is Gemma and me and my fiance James run a business online where we sell vintage and luxury pieces, and we like to share different things that we are learning along the way. So we've been doing it now for about a year and a bit. I think we started February 2025. Right? Can't remember. But yeah, so we've been doing it over a year now, and yeah, so there's a lot of things that we have learned from selling on different platforms, from selling on our own website, and yeah, as I said today, we're going to be talking about how we deal with slow moving stock, different things that we've tried and changed in our listings, and just some overall things that you can kind of try and shift those pieces that are just taking too long to sell. So before we go ahead and make any changes to our listings or to things on our website, or if you're selling through eBay and Vinted and things, we sort of look at the pieces that are taking too long and kind of ask ourselves a few questions, because there could be a few reasons why these pieces aren't selling. So one of the reasons could be is that it's not suitable for the season. So if you're selling a bunch of, say, winter jackets, woolly hats, boots, things like that, you're probably not going to sell them in the summer. So right now for us, we've got quite a lot of hoodies and things like that are sitting in our store just now, and we've not sold one of them for, I would say now, 2 to 3 months, but it's the middle of July. So I kind of predict that we'll probably start selling them maybe next month, as people start to think about their autumn wardrobe and buying sort of hoodies, new sweatshirts and things like that coming into the cooler weather. So seasonality is a massive thing when you're looking at what listings are worth kind of revamping and which ones could probably actually be left for a little bit to see if they start selling when it comes into the the new season that they're actually suited for. Another thing to think about as well is that even though your pieces might be suited to that season, so for example maybe you're selling t-shirts, shorts, skirts and things, and you're thinking, oh those can be worn in the summer, sometimes the colours of the items is maybe what's confusing people a little bit. So if you're selling summer wear and just say it's quite dark autumn winter colours, so like dark red, navy blue, dark green, those kind of colours, that immediately can sometimes say to people, oh, that's a winter piece, just purely on the colour palette. Now don't get me wrong, I know that you can wear summer things that are in those kind of colours, but when people are scrolling and they're looking at loads of different listings, usually in the summer people will gravitate towards lighter colours, whites, creams, neutrals, even khaki and things like that, as well as pastel colours, brighter colours. And in the autumn winter people will gravitate towards darker, moodier, richer colours, and black, grey, burgundy, dark green, navy blue, that kind of stuff. So that's just another little thing to think about as well, is the actual colours of your pieces. And it's also a thing to think about when you're sourcing your pieces. Even though it's something that you think, oh, this will work for winter or this will work for summer, if the colour doesn't match the season, it can be a little bit confusing to customers when they're scrolling through like lots and lots of listings. Another thing to think about when you're looking for what listings to kind of revamp is it a trend? Maybe it's a trendy piece and maybe the trend is maybe just starting to decline or become a little bit less popular, so it's not as in demand. And then another thing to think about is there too many of this item available? So a good way to check that is to actually go onto eBay. So even though you maybe sell on the likes of Vinted or Depop or other platforms, eBay is quite a good sort of thing to look at to give you a bit of a signal what the overall market for something is like. So just say you're wanting to sell, say, I don't know, a certain type of hoodie, like a certain brand, go onto eBay and type that in and be quite specific about what it is, write in the size, the colour, the style, obviously the brand and all that kind of stuff, that it's a hoodie, if it's men's or women, unisex, whatever, and then see how many listings there are. Now, if there's not that many listings, so maybe like only, I don't know, less than 100, 1 to 200, maybe that is a good signal that there's not too many. But if there's thousands or tens of thousands of the same thing, that can be a little bit of a signal that overall the market is quite saturated. And then another thing to look at is the solds on eBay. And again, this can help you determine for other platforms for like Vinted and Depop. So if you go into your eBay, do the search again, and then you can filter it on the left. You maybe have to scroll down a little bit and click sold items, and then it will tell you how many have sold in the past 28 days. So if you've got, say, something that there's maybe 50,000 and there's only been like 3 or maybe 20 odd sold, that's quite a low percentage. But another good thing is that even though there might be a high number of these items, so just say there's, 10,000, and just say 8,000 have sold in the past 28 days, that's quite a good signal that there's obviously quite a high turnaround to that item. So it's all about, I suppose, the ratio of how many sold to how many there's listed. So that's just a little thing to kind of check if you're thinking, oh, these items are not selling. It could be that there's just too many of them, or that the demand isn't there. And then the last thing to think about why something's not selling, and this is usually a thing that you probably would want to leave till last, is the price. So if you're thinking, right, is it not selling? Is it priced too high? Is it too expensive? Go and look at what other people are obviously selling similar items for, and that will help you determine, is it priced too high? Obviously, when you're doing this, make sure to check the condition of the item, because somebody might have listed the same thing as you, but maybe theirs is like really worn and is quite, is quite old. Whereas you've got a new version, obviously your one is going to be worth more money. So that's just something to think about. And obviously as well, people a lot of the time forget about the flip side of that. So just say you have an item and you want to shift it quick, and maybe you price it a bit too low. Now, especially if it's a branded item, people can be very wary of this because they automatically might think it's a fake. So it's a very delicate balance getting pricing right. And I do actually talk about quite a lot of different pricing strategies. I'll kind of link the videos down below because they are actually quite useful. So after you've asked yourself a few of those questions that I've just mentioned, then you're going to think about, right, how can we improve our listing? So there's quite a lot of different things actually that you might want to think about. Now, the reason actually why I thought this would be quite a useful video to make is because somebody commented on one of my recent videos about this exact thing, that they put up a listing, they've done really good pictures, measurements, included lots of things in their description and everything, and they were just wondering why their things weren't selling. So this video, I'm hoping, will give a little bit of a checklist almost, and a little bit of a strategy that you can kind of look through and check all these things and make sure all these things are, you're happy with all these things, to help you figure out how to get things sold quicker. And obviously it'll help identify anything that needs fixed. And don't get me wrong, I am not a super massive eBay Vinted expert. These are just things that I've learned along the way. I actually run another business completely unrelated to this one, but I do list things to sell, so it's very similar to this. And these are things that I have to think about when I'm working on my other store. So it's been really quite handy to kind of like cross over a little bit. So first thing that you want to be thinking about is your photos. So are your photos clear? Are they, in natural daylight as much as possible? Are they consistent? So that's one of the things that I think I did mention to this person who did leave a comment was across your store, and especially within the same listing, you want to have the same kind of background as much as possible. You don't want to be having lots of different backgrounds because it can, look just a little bit less professional. Obviously, I know sometimes it can't be avoided. I mean, we personally have got different backgrounds due to us moving around a little bit when we're taking pictures, but I have been taking photos recently to try and get everything looking consistent again because it bothers me. So, so having a consistent background, having, clear pictures of all the different parts of your item, close-up pictures, faraway pictures, pictures from different angles, if there's any details, obviously photographs of like labels, serial numbers if you're selling like designer stuff, the care instructions, all of that kind of stuff is what you kind of need. Another thing to think about is a cover image. So the main first image that appears, when people are scrolling, that needs to be the best one, really. So I'm actually trying something a little bit different. I'm going to see if I can pop a picture up here. What I'm trying, which is taking a picture of not just the item, but of me holding the item. So a lot of the things that we sell are accessories, so like purses, wallets, handbags, things like that. So I've actually been using that as our cover photo for our latest listings, is taking a picture of me holding it, because I feel like it's a little bit different than just the item, and it shows the scale of the item as well, so people can imagine how they would use it. So that's something else that I would probably suggest if you're wanting to change up your listings a little bit. Better keywords. So if you're if you're using certain keywords for your listing and you're thinking, oh, it's not getting found, maybe think about what other words people might be searching for to look for that same item. So maybe instead of like wallet, if it's like a women's wallet or purse, they might be looking for purse. Obviously put in the material, put in if it's men's, women's, unisex, what colour the hardware is, what material it's made of, obviously the colour, there might be different names for the same colour, all those kind of things. Something that we've actually also been adding to our listings recently is measurements. So especially when it comes to like bags, wallets, purses, clothing, is measure, if it's bags and purses, like the length and the width. If it's clothing, measure like the across the chest or pit to pit, as they call it, the length, and if you want you can maybe measure the shoulder width as well. It just again helps people visualize what it's going to look like when they're using it. It helps them get the size, the scale of the size of the item in their head. And then we're going to go on to the thing where this is the thing that I added to our listing for this particular item, where managed to get it sold after it's sitting for quite a while. So I had to take my jumper off there, even though it's not particularly warm today. Sometimes I get really warm when I'm filming, so that's why I've got on a different top. So yeah, the thing that I really stupidly missed out on our listing for our Chanel like wallet was the serial number label, honestly. So this item was quite a pricey item. It's one of our more expensive pieces, so I think we had it listed for a couple of £100, and it was sitting for months. Like I think we had it, I want to say, for over 6 months. And obviously the more pricier an item is, the chances are it's going to sit a bit longer anyway, which is totally fine. But yeah, it was just sitting for a while, and I was like, why is this not selling? And it was only when a customer asked the question, oh, do you happen to have a picture of the tag with the serial number that should be inside? Now, when I was taking photos of this item, I didn't see the tag. It was tucked in, like hidden away, and it was only when the person asked that I actually went and looked for it, and I realised it was there. Now, what I did was I took a picture of the serial number and the list, and added it to our listing just so that they could see it. That customer didn't end up buying it. However, it sold within the next 2 days to somebody completely different, didn't even ask the question, they just went and bought it. So it just goes to show that, like, those little things, a lot of people might not even bother asking. And it does make me wonder how many people looked at that item and thought, like either, oh, I wonder if it's got the serial number, oh, I can't be bothered asking, and just scrolled past, or looked at it and thought, well, it must be fake, there's not a serial number there, and just scrolled past it. So that just shows you the importance of making sure that you've got all these things photographed and added to the listing, so that customers don't have to ask you. And then another thing that I would make sure and add is little details like the materials that it's made of, fabrics that it's made of, how it fits, like if it's oversized, if it's slim fit, if it's skinny fit, if it's baggy, all those kind of things, especially if it's clothing. And when it comes to the likes of accessories like purses and wallets, say what colour the hardware is, because sometimes it's not clear in the pictures. And I know you might think, oh, it's dead obvious if something's gold or silver, but actually, depending on how much daylight and things might be hitting your item might not be super clear if it's gold or silver. So definitely say that kind of thing. Basically what you want to be doing is really minimizing any possible questions that a potential customer might need to ask you, because a lot of people can't be bothered. And I know that's, not nice to hear and things like that, but people are busy, they don't have time. If they're looking at an item and they think, well, I have no idea how big that is, I don't know if that's going to fit in my bag, I don't know if those trousers are slim fit, or if they're baggy, or if they're oversized or whatever, I can't be bothered. And they just kind of scroll past and then try and find a listing that does tell them all this information. It's quite interesting because there is actually like a sort of theory or like a sort of psychology theory that does kind of talk about this. It basically says, and I've got it on my laptop here so I don't forget it, that the more uncertainty, friction, or unanswered questions a buyer has, the less likely they are to take action to buy the item. And every unanswered question that they have about the item creates more friction, which means there's less chance that they're actually going to buy the item. So even though things are obvious to you because you have the item in front of you, you've taken the photos, you've looked at it probably a million times when you're listing it. However, sometimes it's quite handy to take a step back, or even get somebody else to look at your listings and say, right, is there anything that's not 100% clear? Is there anything, that other people might have questions about? And this is really good for somebody else to look at, because sometimes they might look at it and be like, oh, what does that mean? Or, oh, why does it have that? Or, oh, I'm wondering about this, but it doesn't say. So yeah, basically you want to really try and minimise any unanswered questions that a potential customer might have about your item. Another thing that you could potentially do, which is probably, you might think it's a bit obvious, to try and increase your sales, is to cross-list across different platforms. So if you are only selling on eBay or Vinted or Depop, just duplicate those listings, use the same photos, same description and things to try and minimise, your work, and list them across all the platforms. So you've got Vinted, eBay, Depop, your own website if you are using that. Obviously there's Vistari as well if you're selling more luxury pieces. There might be other places, even like Facebook Marketplace and things. So the more places that you're listing your items, the more kind of opportunities you've got, for your items to be found. So that's definitely something I would try as well to increase sales. And another thing that you can do on Vinted especially is bundle items. So if you've got a bunch of things that just aren't selling, and maybe they're all the same size, or maybe they are, similar items that can be like worn together, or like a sort of, bundle of hoodies or t-shirts or something like that, bundle them together, and then you can sell them in a bundle. Now you can do this a few different ways on Vinted. So you can actually turn on like a bundle function, I'm sure, but I don't know how visible that is to potential customers. If it's just like a little note somewhere that says, this seller has turned on the bundle option, or yeah, I'm not really too sure how visible it is. Another thing that you could do, which I, sort of read this somewhere, is you can actually list things as a bundle. So just say you've got a size, size 12 summer tops, and you've got 4 or 5 of them. Take a picture of them all together, like sort of laid out all together, and then obviously photograph them individually and sell them as a bundle, and obviously discount them a little bit to try and sell those a little bit quicker. You can also do it with, accessories. So for example, just say you have a handbag and a purse, or a purse and like a little key holder or something that goes together really nicely. Bundle them together. Same with if you've got maybe a few different wallets that are all a similar colour scheme, and maybe you think, oh, actually they might want to kind of switch between them, like over the summer season, you can bundle them together as well. So be quite creative with it, and as long as your photographs are different from the photos of the individual items, you shouldn't get flagged for listing duplicate items. The only negative is obviously you'll kind of need to keep an eye on, if you sell any of those individual items, you would need to then obviously delete the bundle or edit it to take those items out. So yeah, obviously that's completely up to you if you think it's worth that sort of extra little bit of work. And then obviously the last thing that I kind of mentioned about was price. So this is the kind of thing that you almost kind of want to avoid adjusting too many times, because you don't want to seem like you're just dropping your prices as low as possible to try and get things to sell. I would definitely try looking at things like listings, improving pictures, bundling things, listing elsewhere. I would try and do all that kind of stuff first before going to just reducing your price. So you want to reduce your price gradually. Obviously don't, slash the price by 50%. I mean, I think I've mentioned in a previous video where I was selling, we were selling off a few like sort of vintage hoodies and things, and I think we were listing them at a certain, I can't remember what price it was, and I think I only reduced it by like 50 pence or something, but because it was like down below to that next pound, it actually made a difference, and we managed to sell a few of those pieces just by doing that. So you don't need to reduce your prices drastically. Also, think about sending offers. So if you aren't already doing that, people that have favorited the item, go in, see who's favorited it, send them an offer, send them a little message, saying, oh, if you're interested, let me know if you've got any questions, and send them like a tempting offer. And again, make the offer tempting. Maybe don't just take off like 50 pence or a pound, you know, take off, you know, something that will actually genuinely tempt them. So maybe like a few pound. Obviously the cheaper the item, you have to be kind of careful with that. Maybe think about it as like a percentage. So what I normally try and do is take off around about 10%. So if it's something that's up for £50, I'll take off roughly a fiver, and kind of take it from there. And another thing to do as well is, I think I mentioned this in our last video who were talking about offers and people's opinions on offers. When people send you offers, and just say you feel like it is a bit of a lowball offer, don't just write that person off. Go back with a counter offer and see if they're quite happy to pay a bit more, because chances are they probably will be happy to pay a little bit more. And then again, when talking about price, there are some times where it might be worth not changing the price. So again, going back to the seasonal side of things, so if you've say got really nice, good quality winter jackets, hoodies, boots and things like that, I wouldn't be going in and changing the prices of those items in July, because obviously people aren't looking for that stuff. You want to be waiting until the actual season to change the prices. So those kind of things I would leave. And then another thing to think about is knowing when to kind of let go. So this could mean either taking it down for a little while and just not having it listed. If it's something that you really, really do want to sell, but you just aren't able to sell it just now, take it down, put it to the side and go back to it. That's totally fine. Obviously there are items that you're thinking if they're not worth very much, it might just be worth putting them to a charity shop, or if it's clothing, taking them to the, you know how you have that cash for clothes where you actually get money for so many kilograms of clothing, so that at least then you're not getting nothing. That could be another option, but again, that's like kind of like last resort. And it's just sort of, I suppose, realising that a lot of the time it's not because the item is a bad item, it's maybe just because it's the wrong season. It's maybe just not trendy right now. So, but again, it's not saying that it might not be trendy in a year's time. So it could just be to do with current trends. It could also just be that it's just not, you've not been able to find the right market for that item yet. And again, it's not because it's a bad item or anything, it's just because the right people are not seeing it. And I do find that when it comes to luxury items and higher priced items, the market for those kind of items is naturally smaller, so it is a little bit trickier to find the right buyer. It's not saying they're not out there, it's just that you haven't found them yet. So again, it's about either deciding to take it down for a little bit, revisiting it maybe in the future, or looking at all these things that I've kind of mentioned, trying to make these changes just so that you can get as many eyes on your item as possible. So yeah, it's just knowing when to kind of like take a step back from a few items, or as I said, just get rid of them if you're needing to clear space and things. So it could be donating them, it could be keeping it for yourself if it's something that you like, or it could be, you know, taking it to like the cash for clothes type thing, so that at least then you're not walking away with nothing. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this week's video there. I hope you found those tips useful, especially if you are experiencing slow sales or sales that are slowing down, or items that have just been sitting there for ages. I hope you found it useful. So make sure and subscribe if you have found it useful, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos, and I'll see you in our next one.